Welcome to another episode of Sports Vibe. I'm your host, Arnav Sarkar, here with another jam-packed episode filled with college football, the NFL as usual, and of course the MLB playoffs now in full swing on both championship series with both New York teams leading the way. Yankees up 2-0, Mets tied 1-1 in their respective series. But we'll get to all of that. As usual, would like to start with none other than college football. Truly one of the best sports on planet Earth. But anyway, another big week of college football is in the books. And just a lot of games to get to. So right off the bat, Clemson knocking off Wake Forest, Missouri bouncing back against UMass. Let's talk about Army and Navy for a second. They've been absolutely sensational. Army knocking off UAB 44-10. They're ranked 23rd. Navy is now ranked 25. Both teams just keep winning in the AAC. Navy knocking off Air Force 34-7. Air Force struggling quite a bit this season. They're just 1-4 with their one win being an FCS win. But regardless of all of that, Army and Navy look good. So if both teams end up playing in the conference championship game, they could end up playing again in the Army Navy game just a week later. But these two teams look really, really good. Other than that, Notre Dame rolling. So Notre Dame will take on both Army and Navy, and what should be very good games now. These are not the same Army and Navy teams from, just a year ago. I believe Navy lost to Notre Dame by quite a bit in Ireland, but this year both Service Academy teams looking pretty good. Did want to get to some of the really good games of college football of the week. Alabama looking to bounce back from their loss against Vanderbilt, and they knocked off South Carolina 27-25. Excuse me, gets back to get back on track. But if you want to call that a struggle win, that's exactly what it was. South Carolina, I believe they almost recovered onside kick, but they were not quite able to do so. They even scored a touchdown and were not able to get the 2-point pass. So Alabama hanging on. First visit for South Carolina to Tuscaloosa, I believe, since 2012 or something like that. Lenore Sellers looks pretty good. 2 touchdowns and a pick. Jalen Milroe, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, 16 of 23. And Alabama just continuing to struggle there against another one of the SEC's, bottom feeders. Although South Carolina kind of in the middle of the pack. I mean, had a very up and down season. Obviously, beating Kentucky, losing LSU, then beating, they started with a win over Old Dominion, then over Kentucky domination, lost to LSU in a heartbreaker, rolled over Akron, but then got rolled over by a much better Ole Miss team, and, this one close against Alabama. So what's next for USC, the other USC? We'll have to see. But Alabama going on to Tennessee, and we'll get to that one later on in the show. But some other games to keep an eye out are, of course, Rutgers taking on Wisconsin. Heartbreaker there for Rutgers losing Sam Brown, but they really do not look like the same team without a lot of their defensive stars down. No longer Beam in the secondary. No Tyrene Powell. I mean, just really, really struggled on both sides of the ball. They got exposed by Washington's air raid system with Braden Locke throwing the football. The running game looked really good for Wisconsin as well, even without Braylon Allen, and they're able to score 5 rushing touchdowns, and they were just all over Scarlet Knights. On the other side of the ball, it was just Kyle Monangai again, but other than him, I believe he had 88 yards or something like that, but other than Kyle Monangai, it was not really looking good for the Scarlet Knights. I think Calic Manis had a very rough game. So did the offense in general. So it just wasn't really, it wasn't really the best look for Rutgers at all. Wisconsin got off to a 7-0 lead, a nice touchdown to Will Pauling, and then Twee Walker with the second one. Rutgers even had a pick, weren't able to do anything, and it was just all Wisconsin on the ground and through the air. Braden Locke 20 for 28, 240, a touchdown and a pick. Tawee Walker, a monster game on the ground. He had 198 yards and 3 touchdowns, including a 55-yard rushing touchdown. Vinny Anthony, 2 receptions for 81. Kagmanis, a really poor game, 12 for 32 with 103 yards and a pick. Monangai, 72 yards and a touchdown. And Drummel, 54 through the air. A big receiver from last season was Christian Drummel. But truly shocking. Rutgers had played very well in all 4 of their previous matchups before this one, or even 5. I mean, they got off to a 5-0 start. Obviously, taking on teams like Howard and Akron weren't really representative, but almost blowing the lead, but being able to hang on Virginia Tech, showing off a passing offense to balance Kamananga in the run game, and then against Washington in the blackout game, just a truly dominant affair by the Scarlet Knights. And well, not really. It was actually Washington. Was the team who should have had the upper hand, but so many mistakes made by Washington, the red zone in the kicking game, penalties kept Washington at bay, and Rutgers was able to hang on, even though Washington gave them a bit of scare at the end of the game, scoring a touchdown, getting the ball back, and getting close to field goal range, but a 55-yard miss. And the Rutgers Scarlet Knights went to 4-0 with a really exciting win in the blackout game to follow up the previous week's win against the Hokies in Blacksburg. So just 2 really exciting wins by the Scarlet Knights, 2 close ones, but Washington game showed that the offense wasn't really up to par with some of the other teams. It just showed that the defense was also allowing some long runs, some big plays, but we're able to stiffen up in the red zone. But we could kind of see the flaws in Rutgers' game. They were having a hard time moving the ball, and then that got exposed against Nebraska. Ethan Kagmanis, 15 for 37, 186, a touchdown and 2 picks. Not able to beat Nebraska, although Kamananga should have gotten to the end zone. Ben Black dropped a touchdown, but Ethan Kagmanis, he has not looked as good with a lot of pressure on him. And the receivers haven't really been able to step up. That's why we had to see Ben Black. And definitely when the competition gets harder, the results gets harder. But it seemed like Rutgers did have the passing game to balance the run game. We're starting to see that might not be the case. It still might be largely the Monangai show. And then last week they just came out effortless, flat, whatever you want to call it. Wisconsin absolutely dominated them in a year that they've, they had back-to-back blowout victories, 52-6 over Purdue, 42-7 over Rutgers, and they've really found their stride under lock. But this season, it's up to Rutgers. They got UCLA, who's not exactly the best team, but they have to fix their offensive issues. Otherwise, they could potentially lose. They could potentially lose again. So we'll have to see. Hopefully they beat UCLA. They still got USC on the road, Minnesota at Maryland, home versus a ranked Illinois team as of now, and then the road game at Michigan State to end the season. But Rutgers looking for some wins. Still, everything's in front of them in terms of their expectations. I don't think anyone was seriously thinking playoffs. At least I hope not. But 7 to 8 wins, I would say, are very gettable for the Scarlet Knights. So we'll see. Hopefully this is just an off game. It's a week-to-week season, like Greg Schiano likes to say. So on to the UCLA season. Really tough one there for Rutgers. But getting back to the big board of games to talk about. So I covered Clemson, Wake Forest, Missouri, UMass. Missouri needed that bounce-back win. And then I talked about Army, Navy a little bit, Alabama with the struggle win, Rutgers big loss, Notre Dame rolled. Texas over Oklahoma is another game I wanted to touch on because against OU team was no longer ranked. Texas was absolutely the dominant team in this match, and after Oklahoma got the first points in the first quarter, Texas absolutely had no problem getting off to a 21-3 lead at halftime, and didn't really stop there either. So just all TU or UT, I should say. I think T is Temple, but Texas having no issues with the Sooners. Pittsburgh knocking off Cal, cross country matchup there, and Pittsburgh remains undefeated. Cal, another tough loss, falling to 3-3 after starting 3-0, 0-3 now in the ACC. Just kind of what people might have thought, but I thought, but they played tough though. They almost beat Florida State, almost beat California or Miami, excuse me, and then almost beat Pittsburgh. And so Pitt able to hang on there and keep their start undefeated. Illinois hanging on against Purdue. That's the most life we've seen against the Boilermakers. You got something going on at quarterback now with Ryan Brown. Luke Altmaier on the other side, 379 yards, 3 touchdowns, and Josh McCray 2 on the ground. But just a truly exciting game. Purdue really even taking the lead and sending this game to overtime. With Illinois hitting the field goal, and then it was Illinois scoring a touchdown, Purdue scoring a touchdown, unable to get the 2-point pass for separation, and Illinois hanging on. But Purdue certainly found something going. Penn State, another overtime game with a win over USC to remain undefeated, number 3 in the nation. We'll have to see what happens when they take on Ohio State in a couple weeks, and they go to Wisconsin now next week. So we'll see how Wisconsin holds up after 2 excellent games. And that's going to be a night game. So a 7:30 game at Wisconsin. Always good atmosphere there. Wisconsin, after 2 dominating wins, been a much tougher opponent. Penn State getting ready for Ohio State as well. In what's currently a 4-3 matchup, with Penn State surprisingly being the higher ranked team. And there's a reason for that. It is because Ohio State lost a heartbreaker to Oregon, a very close game. Oregon took advantage of the 12 men on the field rule, but it was a back and forth affair between the two. Ohio State and Oregon just trading blows. Ohio State able to get up 21-15 before Tez Johnson scored on a 48-yard pass from Dylan Gabriel, 32-31. Ohio State takes the lead, and then Oregon does. Then Ohio State enters with the field goal, and Oregon gets the final one, holding Ohio State out of field goal range. As well, Howard slid as time ran out. So some misexecution there by the Buckeyes, but Oregon able to win on their home field. Yeah, I mean, just that was the biggest game of the week on Saturday night. Probably 1 and 2 in the Big Ten going at it, and it definitely lived up to the billing. Will Howard with 326, 2 touchdowns. Dylan Gabriel 341 with 2 touchdowns. Jordan James 115 rushing yards and touchdown. Travion Henderson led the Buckeyes with 87. Jeremiah Smith 100 yards and a touchdown. Evan Stewart on the other side for Oregon 149 and a touchdown as well. So it's certainly just a really exciting game. There, Georgia also hanging on against Mississippi State, who's now 1-5, 41-31. LSU over Ole Miss, 29-26. Tennessee over Florida, 23-17 in overtime to bounce back from their loss against Arkansas on what's known as Upset Saturday. Iowa State undefeated, 6-0. 28-16 over West Virginia. Kansas State knocking off Colorado 31-28. And finally, Boise State knocking off Hawaii 28-7. So that's Ashton Jeanty, of course, having another monster game. Matt Masson with 217 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Ashton Jeanty on Ashton Jeanty, Heisman favorite, 31 carries, 217 yards and 1 touchdown. Cam Camper, IU transfer with 111. But Ashton Jeanty really should be the Heisman candidate. He is on Canada. He has over 1,000 yards on the season already, I believe. 1,248 yards, and we aren't even halfway through the season. I mean, this is just absolutely sensational running there by Boise State running back. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much college football in a nutshell, and in a week where there were a lot of really good matchups. Obviously, LSU hanging on over Ole Miss and a big showdown for the college football playoff. LSU getting a big win. They're number 8 now after their opening loss against USC, and they're also 5-1. Ole Miss falling to 5-2 with their second loss after losing to Kentucky. And then of course Oregon knocking off Ohio State to take their number 2 ranking at the top of the Big Ten. Ohio State losing in a heartbreaker. That game went on. Was pretty evenly matched, and Oregon able to hold them off, that very talented roster of theirs. So Oregon getting the win over the Bucks, and on to next week, I guess. So that's pretty much college football week 7 in a nutshell. On to week 8, Oregon taking on Purdue in the Friday night game. That's has upset watch written all over it. Purdue has now found some life, giving Illinois a hard fight, but I'd still expect Oregon to be able to knock it off. It'd be something if we get another Friday spoiler maker upset there. as Purdue's known to do over the years. Some other games to look out for: Nebraska versus Indiana. The Hoosiers getting the big noon kickoff treatment, taking on the Huskers. IU now ranked 16 in the country. They've been absolutely sensational, and Nebraska only one loss, 5-1. They knocked off, they fell to Illinois, and they, after that knocked off Purdue, knocked off Rutgers, taking on IU before Ohio State should be interesting. The Hoosiers, one of the big turnaround teams of the season, looking to stay in the playoff conversation. I mean, if they can keep rolling, I mean, they get Nebraska, Washington, Michigan State, Michigan. They'll probably be favorites in every game except for Ohio State, and it should be a good one. But big noon kickoff treatment. So yeah, I mean, look at Indiana. I mean, it is just absolutely insane. So we'll have to see how that one goes. One of the big games to watch. I'll definitely have my eyes on that as I watch Rutgers versus UCLA. Some other games that highlight the slate next week. Miami taking on Louisville should be good. Auburn, Missouri, Army, East Carolina, Virginia, Clemson. I mean, these are all games, but even Charlotte, Navy. I mean, a lot of ranked teams getting non-ranked matchups, but some of the ones to watch out for: Alabama taking on Tennessee. Last time Alabama went to the state of Tennessee, they ended up with a loss to Vanderbilt. This time it's the Vols, who are sitting at 5-1 after knocking off Florida, falling to Arkansas. Both teams are coming in struggling, so we'll have to see how this one goes on the third Saturday of October. Michigan taking on Illinois. That's a game where Michigan got the scraped by on their undefeated season on a last-second field goal. This year they're ranked similarly. Illinois with a 5-1 record, and Michigan with a 4-2 record. Number 22 Illinois and number 24 Michigan should be a good contest between two evenly matched sides. Michigan trying to stay alive here, even for playoff perspective. I mean, they did lose to Washington, who's also 4-2, a team that lost to Rutgers, but and Iowa, they got dominated by Iowa. I mean, this year Michigan not looking too great, but they are 4-2. Illinois 5-1. So we'll have to see. It's a big test for Michigan, considering they also got games at Ohio State and Indiana, and home versus Oregon coming up. So that one should be a good litmus test against another similarly matched team. They did knock off USC. They did knock off Minnesota, and then they fell to Washington. So Illinois will be certainly a good test if they can knock them off. It'll provide some hope for the rest of the season. I see 3 losses in that schedule and potentially 3 wins, Illinois being the one swing game for But some of the other ones, Georgia, Texas, I think is going to be the big nighttime showdown of this week. Some of the other LSU, Arkansas, Kansas State, West Virginia, Iowa State hosting UCF, and SMU taking on Stanford are the other games with ranked matchups in it. Notre Dame at Georgia Tech, Texas A&M at Mississippi State. But I think the key games to watch out for are Oregon, Purdue, Nebraska, Indiana. Going to be a very good one. Alabama, Tennessee, Michigan, Illinois, and then Georgia, Texas, the night game. To wrap everything up at 7:30. That should be really good. Texas, the number 1 team in the country, 6-0 unblemished, as a lot of the other SEC teams at the top fell off. Dominating win over Oklahoma. They've dominated all season, have had no issues. Georgia coming in as their toughest opponent all season. The Bulldogs, after losing a heartbreaker there to Alabama, after edging out Kentucky, losing to Alabama in what was the game of the season. They've won 2 straight, knocking off Auburn, knocking off Mississippi State. We'll see who the best team in college football really is. If Texas holds on, it's them. If Georgia can upset them, they might have something to say about that. We'll have to see, but should be a really good game under the lights at UT. But yeah, that's pretty much college football in a nutshell. Recapping last week, previewing the next week. The NFL, another busy week. I'll get to a little 16 game recap in just 1 second. But in other news, Robert Saleh got fired. Replaced by Jeff Ulbrich. That was big news. Devontae Adams got traded to the Jets to reunite with Aaron Rodgers. And I believe the Bills also ended up getting a star receiver as well recently. So Amari Cooper coming into Buffalo, so should be an interesting one as well. But yeah, I mean NFL, free agency hot stove. I mean that Devontae Adams trade, has been in the works for quite a long time, but yeah, he's gonna be with Aaron Rodgers as the Jets try to go all in on their big acquisition and try to make a playoff push here. Another heartbreaking loss for the Jets. That's on the Monday night game. I'll get back to that one towards the end of this recap, but to start with the Thursday night game in Seattle. Seattle Seahawks falling to 3-3 after a 3-0 start on the season. The Niners improving to 3-3, and that's very shocking, you might think. But Brock Purdy going 255 for 3 touchdowns. Geno 312, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. The Niners definitely using the opportunity to bounce back. They have the Chiefs next week. Some divisional losses for San Francisco, including surprisingly to the Cardinals and the Rams, but they are able to hold off Seattle. So yeah, like I said, Kansas City coming up should be a big test in the Super Bowl rematch, although they haven't looked the same. London getting the Bears versus the Jags. Caleb Williams starting to find some life with 23 for 29, 226 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick as the Bears getting the win in London over Jacksonville, who has another game in London against the Patriots. Buccaneers rolling all over the Saints. They're 4-2. The Saints, after starting 2-0, are now 2-4. Tampa Bay, Baker Mayfield with 4 touchdowns, 3 picks. Spencer Rattler, the former Gamecock, in there for, I was going to say Carolina, but New Orleans. Kamara, 40 yards and a rushing touchdown. But it was really Tampa Bay's day. They have an explosive offense. Sean Tucker, 136 yards on the ground. Godwin, 125, 2 touchdowns in the air. And even though Baker Mayfield threw 3 picks, he also threw 4 touchdowns. Although New Orleans, with the barrage of scoring in the second quarter to take the lead at halftime, 27-24. It was Tampa Bay. It was all Tampa Bay in the second half, and dominating win for Tampa. I do like that team. Another matchup that was supposed to be very interesting and was Tampa Bay, Washington taking on Baltimore in a DMV rivalry. 2 great offenses. The Ravens started 0-2 on the season after. Did they start 0-2? Yeah, they lost to the Chiefs and then the Raiders, but they've really bounced back since then, knocking off the boys, the Bills, the Bengals in a thriller, and now the Commanders. The Commanders look like they might have not lost a game for a long time. I mean, after losing their opener to Tampa, they've looked better every week, but this week they ran into one of the best teams in the league, even though they had a slow start. Derrick Henry, 132, 2 touchdowns. Zay Flowers, 132 receiving yards. Lamar Jackson, a nearly perfect game, 20 for 26, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Jane Daniels, a more pedestrian game, but still 269 yards and 2 touchdowns. And although Washington closed the lead to 13-17, it was all Baltimore, and mainly Baltimore in the third quarter. Washington tried to keep it close, but did not have enough to keep up with their crosstown rivals, you can say. So a couple 4-2 teams, even though the Commanders lost, they're still first in the East, 4-2. The Eagles 3-2, Cowboys 3-3, and the Giants sitting at 2-4 in the NFC East standings. But just to keep the show on the road, moving on to the next week, with the Cardinals taking on the Packers. It was all Green Bay, 34-13. Jordan Love with 258 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick. Definitely showing why he's another great Green Bay quarterback in the mix there. After losing to the Vikings, they've won 2 straight. They host the Texans next week, and the Cardinals struggling at 2-4. Kyler Murray 214 touchdown, but it was really all Green Bay up north. Colts edging out the Titans. The Joe Flacco show is Anthony Richardson heals from his injury. Close win. Will Levis, who seemingly has a silly picture moment every single week, had another one with sending a ball boy to the hospital carried on the stretcher, which is just highly unfortunate. But 16 for 27 for a pedestrian, 95 yards, a touchdown, a pick. Tony Pollard getting it going on the ground, 93 yards and touchdown. DeAndre Hopkins, 54 yards and 4 receptions. But it really was the Joe Flacco show in Indianapolis, seeming like last year with he did the same with the Browns. This year coming in to Indy and riding the ship there for the Colts. The Titans sitting at just 1-4. The Colts 3-3. Keep the ship going on the road. The next one, Texans versus Patriots. CJ Stroud with 192, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Drake May is in New England, and he made his start. He made his debut, able to get to 243 yards, 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. He's already looking better than Brissett, even with the 2 picks. 38 yards on the ground, and suddenly the New England Drake May era is in full effect. Still wasn't enough as the Texans rolled. CJ Stroud looks really good, and Joe Mixon, 102 yards and touchdown. Stephon Diggs, 77 yards and a touchdown. The Texans are 5-1, leading the AFC South. Their only loss coming to the hands of the Vikings, and it was quite the dominating win by Minnesota. So Texans look pretty good. We could do a little standings check here. Ravens 4-2, tied with the Steelers. The Bengals and the Browns kind of in disarray. The Chiefs, of course, undefeated 5-0 with the Super Bowl rematch coming up. I think we already know that they're going to end up going back. And then, of course, in the AFC East, Buffalo leading the way 4-2. In the NFC East, it's Commanders 4-2. Like I said, Eagles 3-2, Cowboys 3-3, Giants 2-4. The NFC West led by the Niners and Seahawks. Cardinals, Rams 2-4, 1-4. Vikings lead the competitive NFC North with all 4 teams above 400. The Vikings 5-0, Lions 4-1, and the Bears and Packers both 4-2. And then finally NFC South, Falcons and Bucks both 4-2. Saints 2-4. The Panthers now 1-5. But just to get back to the games here, Browns taking on the Eagles. This one, Jalen Hurts able to get the win for Philadelphia. Saquon Barkley, 18 carries, 47 yards. A.J. Brown back in the lineup for 116 yards and the receiving touchdown. But it was definitely Philadelphia able to get the win there. So, a low-scoring game. Philly hanging on against the awful Browns team was 1-5. The Giants beat Cleveland. Nick Sirianni, for some reason, feeding with his own fans. I really don't understand why he would do that. Philly fans booing him, so shows that Philly fans hate Nick Sirianni as much as the rest of us do now. And Nick Sirianni just making more bizarre decisions every single week. So it's just typical Eagles fashion. They play the Giants next week, but they are able to get the win and steady the ship at 3-2 after losing to Tampa. Kind of an up and down season for Philadelphia so far, but still a lot of season ahead of them. They come to New York next week to battle Big Blue. So looking forward to that game as a Giants fan, obviously. But I guess just to keep the ship going on, Chargers taking down the Denver Broncos 23-16. Bo Nix, 2 touchdowns and a pick, 216 yards. Justin Herbert, 237 touchdown. The Chargers 3-2, riding the ship after falling to the Chiefs a couple weeks ago now. So had been a little bit of a while since that one, but played the Monday night game against the Cardinals this week. I believe Jim Harbaugh in Denver had some sort of heart condition thing that he had to get checked out, but Chargers able to steady the ship. Denver falling. They played the Thursday night game against New Orleans to open up the week, actually, so that should be interesting. The Broncos had actually had 3 straight wins against the Bucks, the Jets, and the Raiders beforehand. But I guess going on to the next game, Steelers taking on the Raiders in basically what was a Pittsburgh home game in Vegas. Aiden O'Connell, former Boilermaker quarterback, 227 yards and a touchdown, a pick. Justin Fields, 14 for 24, 145. Najee Harris with 106 and Pickens 53 yards, 3 receptions. All Steelers here. The Raiders didn't score a ton of points. They scored a touchdown, take the lead in the first quarter. Since then, it was all Pittsburgh with Justin Fields leading the way. Russell Wilson still recovering from his injury. They might just stick with him, but certainly the Pittsburgh Steelers show in Vegas to kind of remove the sting of their loss to the Dallas Cowboys the week beforehand. Speaking of the Cowboys, 47-9 destruction at the hands of the Detroit Lions. So bad it was funny for all Cowboys haters out there, including myself. Yeah, I mean, just absolute domination by Detroit. I mean, Dallas, after the first field goal, just had no chance. It was all Detroit. 4 touchdowns in the second quarter. Dak Prescott threw 2 picks, 178 yards and 2 picks, and Jared Goff 315 and 3 touchdowns. David Montgomery adding 80 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Jamison Williams 76 yards and receiving touchdown. But really, all Detroit. It got so bad they were trying to throw passes to their offensive linemen and just absolutely humiliating on Jerry's birthday. Meanwhile, the Falcons go into Carolina. Andy Dalton looks decent, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. It's a Kirk Cousins show, 19 for 30, 225 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Algier with 105 and a touchdown. Drake London 74 yards and a touchdown. But it was really the Atlanta Falcons able to hang on against the Carolina Panthers. Carolina did make things pretty interesting, closing it to 25-20, and then but then it was all Falcons the rest of the way to get the W. Panthers, after what looked like a promising win in Vegas, are definitely in the Andy Dalton era, but still no match for a lot of the better teams. It's a two-way race at the top of the NFC South with the Falcons and Bucks. But finally, my New York Giants in the Sunday night slate, falling to the Cincinnati Bengals. It's one week is great, the next week is terrible, and that's the Daniel Jones experience. That's the Giants experience. 205 yards for DJ, 22 of 41, a really bad completion percentage there for a pick. While Joe Burrow, 19 for 28, 208. The Bengals getting a much needed second win. One of the worst defensives in the NFL in the Bengals. Somehow, the Giants only score 7 points. Meanwhile, Burrow had a 55-yard rushing touchdown. He took down the field. T. Higgins 7 for 77 yards. And it was Joe Burrow and Cincinnati winning in a very low-scoring game. The Giants defense getting there a lot. Bengals defense as well. Giants missing a couple field goals as well didn't really help them. It was Greg Joseph going 0 for 2, missing 2 critical kicks, one that could have tied the game, and one late where they needed to cut it to 1 score. And hopefully Graham Gano is able to return. The Giants defense, I believe, still does lead the NFL in sacks, but Azeez Ojulari had a couple, Dexter Lawrence with 1, Brian Burns with 1 there. A pretty poor game. Tyrone Tracy, 50 yards on 17 carries. Daniel Jones led the way in rushing, 56 yards on 11 carries, and then, of course, 205 yards in the pick. So just not really looking too great. Hopefully they get Malik Neighbors back for next week against Philly. And finally, to wrap this one up here, the Bills taking on the Jets. The Jets just needed a win, and were not able to get it. Just not able to get it for the third straight time in a row, losing a 1-score game after their domination against the Patriots, falling to the Broncos, losing to the Vikings, and then coming back and losing to Buffalo after the coaching change. Josh Allen, 19 for 25, 215, 2 touchdowns. Ray Davis, really the big star, the rookie running back, with 97 yards on the ground, 55 through the air. Breece Hall at 113 rushing yards. Lazard 114 in receiving yards. Aaron Rodgers 294, 2 touchdowns and a pick. But some missed field goals there by Greg Zuerlein definitely didn't really help the Jets. They still played a very competitive game, including a Hail Mary from Aaron Rodgers to Lazard at the end of the second. They tied it up in the third quarter, but it was Buffalo getting the win on a Tyler Bass 22-yarder. Just not great. As I said, Amari Cooper joining the Bills, and Greg Zuerlein joining the Jets. So, Amari Cooper joining the Bills, and Devontae Adams joining the Jets. But yeah, just not a great affair for the Jets, just like the Giants, falling in a primetime contest there. And Greg Zuerlein going 2 for 4, missing 2 kicks, leaving points on the table, just as the Giants did with Greg Joseph. But it's just life at MetLife, I guess. Just home teams losing primetime games, and the Bills now 4-2, riding the ship after a couple losses to the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans. So that's gonna be it for this NFL slate here. All 16 game recap here. I think next week some teams on the bye, so maybe some less games to talk about there. But next week we'll have to see what happens in football. Every week's its own story. Some of the top games for next week, we got Yeah, the Lions taking on the Vikings in the NFC North. That should be a really good one. The Lions 4-1 coming off the domination against Dallas. Their only loss coming to Tampa Bay. The Vikings 5-0. They've lost a couple, or they've won a couple one-score games, but so far one of the best teams in the NFL. I could just go through the whole slate and just highlight the exciting games. Some Broncos taking on New Orleans tomorrow. Patriots Jaguars in London. A second week for the Jaguars over there. The Lions taking on the Vikings, as I mentioned. Titans in Buffalo to take on the Bills. Dolphins Colts, Seahawks Falcons. 1:00 start time there. Texans Packers should be go 1-5-1. Houston taking on 4-2 Green Bay. The Bengals Browns in the AFC North contest. Both teams need to desperately win to save their season. The Eagles taking on the Giants. First matchup between those two sides since Saquon Barkley went to Philadelphia. So it's going to be an exciting game as fans just really upset about that whole thing. It's understandable that he went there, but it's just so unfortunate what happened over there. Yeah, I mean, Saquon Barkley was, one of the top, players for the Giants for years, and the Giants didn't want to pay him. They wanted to invest in Daniel Jones, and, Saquon decided to walk. I mean, Giants offered him some decent contracts. Saquon Barkley said he wanted more money. The Eagles gave him even more guaranteed money, 26 million guaranteed, and I think 37.75 overall. And Giants fans absolutely hated the decision, but it's gonna be all right. It should be a really interesting game when Saquon and the Philadelphia Eagles head into town. Big rivalry there. So it should be a really good game. I'm really excited to see that. In terms of the matchup on the field, the Eagles kind of struggling this year. Had a lot of injuries. Whatever else happens. But I mean, the Eagles, getting back AJ Brown, they got Devontae Smith, they got some of their top players back. So that should be an interesting one there. They got a win over the Cleveland Browns. It just I'm looking at some articles here where Saquon Barkley says he won't seek out a few moments. It should be interesting when between the Giants trying to get him on the ground, Saquon Barkley looking for hopefully not anything personal, but just to play his game with Philadelphia. It should be an interesting it should be an interesting effort there between the Giants and the Eagles. The Giants obviously getting their their win last year in kind of what was a meaningless game. This year a little bit more meaningful. Eagles have dealt with some injuries. Lane Johnson, I think Devontae Smith Lane Johnson, Devontae Smith, and AJ Brown. I believe the two receivers are back in town for Philadelphia, back healthy. So Philly at 3-2, they've kind of had an up and down season. The Giants have also kind of had an up and down season in a while. Hopefully, Malik Neighbors returning for Big Blue. So we'll have to see what happens there. A roller coaster of emotions. They've started with 28-6, 21-18 loss to Washington before stringing, putting together a win on the road in Cleveland, 21-15, a loss to the Cowboys, 20-15, and then the win over Seattle on the backs of good offense, good defense, and good special teams, 29-20, and then, of course, the disheartening loss to Cincinnati, 17-7, but a big showdown with the rival Philadelphia. Really do looking forward to this game. It should be interesting on Giants fans. Greet Saquon Barkley with the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, very hated, very hated rival there. But it feels like the moment's has kind of died down a little bit. But it should still be really exciting to see him in the flesh back in New York for the first time. Really looking forward to that one. Some of the other games to look out for here, the Chiefs taking on the 49ers in a Super Bowl rematch. That should be, quite the interesting game as well. The 49ers have not been the same team they were last year. They're just 3-3. They've been struggling quite a bit. Chiefs just continue to be the Chiefs and find ways to win, no matter who they're without, even without Rashee Rice, without Isaiah Pacheco. They just know what to do to win. I mean, they've looked sloppy, but they've cleaned it up well against the Saints. I mean, their defense, they have Chris Jones, and they know what to do, bringing the blitzes, the pressure. Mahomes has not been his usual self, but As long as he has, like, his Travis Kelce, who hasn't even, been that all that great this year, and Xavier Worthy, an excellent piece. But whoever they bring in, they can make it work. They obviously brought in Kareem Hunt and Juju Smith-Schuster back to the team. They both had big games, so I expect the Chiefs to win this one, but it should be an interesting game out on the West Coast. Second straight Super Bowl rematch year, because last year the Chiefs played the Eagles in Kansas City. This year the Chiefs going to San Francisco. The Sunday night game, a showdown between the Jets and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Aaron Rodgers going to Pittsburgh with Devontae Adams, who's likely to make his Jets debut. Against the Steelers. So that should be a good one between two AFC East teams. Baltimore, actually Steelers AFC North, but two AFC opponents. The Ravens taking on the Bucks. Both teams at 4-2. Two of the more explosive offenses in the NFL as well. To conclude the week, I think that should be a good one as well. I kind of forgot I was going to do. I was trying to do a 16 game recap or preview, but then I got super hyper focused in on Eagles Giants. Some of the other games, Raiders Rams on the West Coast, Panthers taking on the Commanders in Washington, as Washington looks to bounce back from one of their their second loss this time. Another close by local-ish team, and then the final game of the week, Chargers taking on the Arizona Cardinals. To wrap up the slate. But yeah, that's pretty much the NFL slate. Giants Eagles, obviously the big game of the week for me. Chiefs 49ers, probably the big game of the week for the country. It's going to be Tom Brady broadcasted game on Fox, so definitely looking forward to that one as well. But yeah, that's pretty much this week of football, both college football and the NFL. I guess some other things to keep in mind. The MLB playoffs going on as well. Just exciting stuff for the city of New York and baseball. The Mets tied the series 7-3. Game 3, excuse me, is today in New York. The series moving from the west to the east coast. And in the other series, the Yankees versus the Guardians, all Yankees. So since last time we talked, the Yankees dispatched the Royals 3-1. Cleveland knocked off Detroit 3-2. LA knocked off San Diego, unfortunately 3-2, and the Mets knocked off their division rivals, the Phillies, 3-1, to keep their season alive. And so Mets Dodgers, big game today in Queens. In Queens. And then the Yankees Guardians, big game tomorrow, and on Friday both teams play again. So it should be an interesting one. World Series, definitely, very possible we get Yankees versus Mets, or at least one of the two teams. Yankees seem to know what they're doing. I was watching the game last night. Aaron Judge hitting a two-run homer for his first in the postseason. I mean, Soto's been good. Stanton's been good. They've been going off. So yeah, certainly exciting baseball, in New York, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens the rest of the way. But in the meantime, this has been another episode of SportsVibe. It's all the college football, NFL, and MLB action from the week. Heck of a lot of games covered and a lot of exciting ones as well. But as always, I'm your host, Arnav Sarkar. Hope you have a good week, and we will see you next time.